Welcome to another Maamar we learned today in the Mizgeres of Project Melukat. These Maamar are learned l'schus l'nishmas, our beloved Shiur, Akiva, Wagner. The Maamar we learned today is the Maamar Baruch Shneur Kalmenson Tashmem Gimel. It was said Shabbos Pashas Mikhail Zois Chanukah Mem Gimel. It's based on a Maamar of the Alter Rebbe, the same the Ramaschal Baruch Shneur Nisim. The Alter Rebbe said his Maamar, the first year Yudis Kislev, the Chassidim then were wild, they were celebrating like crazy, and it said that this Maamar was basically to channel all that energy into Chabad, into Primis Geifin. The Alter Rebbe famously said then, She-asa Nisim Bayomim Oheim is Chanukah Purim Bizman Hazeh is Yudis Kislev. The build of the Maamar is very geschmack. It's a very organized, structured beer where the Rebbe is going to basically go through different levels and different liquids. You have water, you have wine, you have the advantages in each, and then the greatest of all is oil, and within oil you have many levels in oil. You have the fragrance of the oil, the Shem HaMishcha, and then you have the Shem HaMor, and then there's the miracle of the Shem HaMor, basically bringing out the greatness of the miracle of finding the Pach HaShemen and celebrating Chanukah specifically for that Nes, and even greater than the miracle of winning the war, which is seemingly maybe more strategic and more necessary. It saved the Jewish people's lives. But ultimately, when you understand the Primis Inyanim, when you understand the spiritual significance of the miracle of the lighting of the menorah, you understand then why the Yom Tov of Chanukah was established specifically for that miracle. Let's get into it. The Divrei Maschal of our Maamar is the bracha that we make when we light menorah. Boruch Shneur Kalmenson, we tell the Eibusher bracha that he makes miracles for our fathers in those days, but in our times. It says in this time, the time of year. The bracha was established by the Rabbanan Leil, in essence, not necessarily for the miracle of the Jewish people being victorious against the Greeks, which was obviously a tremendous miracle. The Eibusher gave an army of Giborim, of strong people, in the hands of weak. Ella, rather, on another miracle, the second miracle, the miracle of finding the jug of oil. And therefore this miracle is made by night when we light the menorah, which the mitzvah of lighting menorah is a testimony, is in correspondence to the miracle of finding the jug of oil and lighting the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash. Now we do Nisim during Shemini Esrei, and that's more thanking the Eibusher for the other miracles, but the miracle, the bracha of Boruch Shneur Nisim, in other words, the primary miracle celebrated is the miracle of the Pach HaShemen, and the question is how comes. Let's see. It's explained in the Maamar Baruch Shneur Nisim from the Alter Rebbe with edits and a goyis from Tzemach Tzedek. If you want to understand why the greatest miracle of Chanukah was established to be the celebration is for the miracle of lighting candles. First you have to understand what oil is all about. Let's understand the concept of oil spiritually. He explains there the reason why, physically speaking, oil rises and floats above all liquids. And here in the parentheses he brings yayin and mayim, which is wine and water, which are the two liquids we're going to be discussing in the Maamar. Who the reason for this is it's like all physical matters that evolve from the same realities the way there are in a spiritual sense. So in other words, spiritually speaking, oil is higher than wine and water. Why? Yayin and mayim represent Chabad, the person's mind. Yayin is bina, mayim is chokhmah, which is just in very short. Chokhmah is that first original flash of wisdom, and then the bina is when that's developed into details. What's shemen? Shemen or chokhmah stimo. Shemen is chokhmah shebekeser. It is the source for that original flash. Where does that come from? From a place that's even completely higher than seichel. Chokhmah shebekeser. B'meila oil is completely higher than water and wine. Based on that, the Alter Rebbe explains why, when inaugurating the Mizbeach, it was done through oil. Which oil? The anointing oil. Why? The idea of chinuch, the idea of establishment, of inauguration, is through bringing oiris nailim, great lights that are higher than the later hamshachas that are going to be done routinely on the Mizbeach through the karbanos that were later. What are we basically saying? Just like chinuch typically is the foundation of a building has to be the strongest part of the building, the foundation of a person's life has to be the strongest part of his education. So too, when you want to, so to speak, recreate and begin a process of karbanos, the greatest oiris are necessary. B'meila, when you want to inaugurate the Mizbeach, you needed to have this shemen HaMishcha. Here in the brackets, Rebbe adds, it's explained in other places in Chassidus, the reason why the Nisim, the leaders of the congregations, when inaugurating the Mizbeach, needed to bring a ribui karbanis, an abundant amount of karbanis, matanis. And another thing they did, which was an exception to the rule, is they brought incense, they brought spices, ketores, on the Mizbeach HaChitzon, on the external altar, which was not common, which was not regular. Usually they would bring it in the Mizbeach HaPnimi. If you want to establish, if you want to educate, inaugurate the Mizbeach, that should be now roy, it should be appropriate. You should now be able to have the ability now to sacrifice karbanis on it for the rest of time. You needed to have this great foundation of the greatest, highest revelations. Al Yidei this needed to obviously proceed, needed to be superior, greater than the amshachas that are done later through the routine avodah of karbanis that are done on the mizbeach. And therefore, the way I established, the way I set the mizbeach was through anointing it with oil. Which, like we explained, oil is chachmas tima. It's higher than chachma bina. It is the chachma in keser, the source of chachma, which are higher than the hamshachas that are later done through the regular karbanis. After the Alter Rebbe explains the greatness of Shemen HaMishcha, which is the anointing oil, he then goes to explain how even greater than this oil is the oil that was lit on the Menorah Shemen HaMor. So typically, what the Alter Rebbe's build in the Maamar here is, we're trying to bring out the greatness of the Shemen HaMor. First, as an introduction, we'll bring our oils all together. Within oil, you have oil of anointing, which is one level, and then Shemen HaMor is greater. So the Rebbe says in his base how it seems like it's just a build-up, but in truth, there's really more to it. There's actually a lot more here, where there's a reason why the Alter Rebbe brings this whole beer about Shemen HaMishcha, not just, so to speak, as a lead-up to Shemen HaMor. But let's see, base. The Rebbe says the reason why he elaborates to explain this idea that Shemen HaMishcha was necessary. Anointing oil was used to establish the Beis HaMikdash. It's not just an introduction. Now what? To understanding the anointing oil, we can understand in a greater oifen the luminary oil. Ella, rather, it's much more than that. Also this, in other words, also this concept of inauguration is also connected to Chanukah. Simply, why do I call it Chanukah? Because there was a Chanukah on Mizbeach. We inaugurated the Mizbeach, the Beis HaMikdash, after the Greeks desecrated it. And that also explains why a Chanukah we read in Kriyas HaTorah, the Kabbanas HaNisim. In other words, a Chanukah, one of the essential points of Chanukah is establishing and inaugurating, beginning the process of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, at the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, they didn't have the physical anointing oil. They didn't use it during Chanukah, but ultimately they needed that spiritual boost, that chachmas tima that we explained exists within the Shemen HaMishcha. They had it at least in a spiritual sense, and that gave them the ability to inaugurate the Beis HaMikdash. Ella, rather, however, after explaining the first concept that exists within Chanukah, but there's something even greater, and that's the miracle which is in the luminary oil. Kumtai said both really are related to Chanukah. Just within Chanukah itself, there's greater, and then there is the Shemen HaMishcha. That also explains why the conclusion of the reading of Torah of Chanukah, after reading the Kabbalas HaNisim and after reading the Chanukah Mizbech that happens on the last day, what is the last parsha we read? We read Chanukah. The parsha of Aaron HaKohen lighting menorah, which is alludes to the menorah that we light today, like the famous Ramban there, brings in the Ara, where the Eibusher basically comforts Aaron by telling him, your candles are eternal, they're going to last forever, which is a remiss to the Chanukah candles that last until today, all throughout Golus. Very simple. It's a Seder Mamat L'mayla. The Kriyas HaTorah works its way up. First we talk about the inauguration, and then the conclusion of the inauguration by the Chanukah Mizbech. And then we talk about the luminary oil, and finally, the last day, we say the Parsha of Baalei Zcha, which is the greater miracle of Chanukah, the miracle of the menorah. Now the Rebbe is going to start to explain to us, okay, so let's understand better now what exactly is the Mizbeach all about. What are the Karbanis brought in the Mizbeach? Based on that, what is the Shemen, which is greater than that? And then we'll go on to explain even greater what are the Shemen Lamor. So basically here, let's understand first what is the Mizbeach and what is the Shemen, which are not with the Mizbeach. We know on the Mizbeach there were animal sacrifices, but along with every animal sacrifice, there were also nisachim that were poured different liquids. Typically, it was wine. The karbanos and the nisachim are pnimis. This is, so to speak, the food of the world, right? Therefore, they are actually referred to as food and drink. Why? Because all the energy that's flowed and drawn through a person bringing a sacrifice and pouring the different liquids on the Mizbeach, they were pnimis, they were digested, they became part of the flesh and blood of the person. Within the two, within Karbanos and Nisachim, within the sacrifices and the liquids are greater. Just like typically, the water is what brings the food to every place the body needs to go. It's just like physically speaking. There's a difference between eating bread and drinking wine. What does bread reveal? The external vitality of the person, the fact that a person needs to live, and that's bread. Bread gives you the ability to, basic energy to live. While the yayin mizgal pnimis hanefesh, ultimately through drinking wine, it brings out the pnimis, the essence, the eternal part of the person. Your real personality, your real colors come out when you drink wine. The same is true in the eating and drinking that the Mizbeach happens. The energy drawn down through the karbanis that are called lechem, bread. This is, so to speak, the energy that gives the world the ability to live, just like bread gives you the ability to live on, right? So the world needs to function. Every aspect of creation needs chayis, needs vitality, and that happens through the karbanis, through the food that's consumed on the Mizbeach. However, through the wine that we pour, this is even greater than just pnimius. It's which is still connected to the functionality of the world, but in a greater way, just like wine brings out a deeper level of the person. Now that Rebbe says, we're going to add another aspect. Within the things poured on the Mizbeach, we know that once a year, in addition to pouring wine, they poured water as well. The water is even higher than yayin. The Alter Rebbe explains that the reason why only pouring wine on the Mizbeach is explicit in the written Torah. Nisach is only an oral tradition from Moshe Rabbeinu. Obviously, eventually the Rabbanan at some point they lean it, so to speak, on a pasuk, but ultimately it is halachal Moshe B'Sinai. It's oral. Why? The concept of chachma, like we explained, doesn't come down into words, doesn't come down to details. It's just a flash of original energy, therefore it can't come down in words. What it's known, Chazal teaches that the words of the sages are sweeter than the wine of Torah. What's the wine of Torah? The wine of Torah is Torah Shebiksav, what's written. We pour wine on the Mizbeach. That is one of the things Torah obligates a person to bring along with his carbon. You have something even deeper and greater, and that is Nisach HaMayim, the water. Now, in the next paragraph, the Rebbe is going to connect it to literal wine and water and how it connects to Chacham and Bina. This concept that wine is Bina, water is Chachma. How does this connect to their literal manifestations down here? You have literal wine and water. First of all, wine has a taste as well as it's something that brings joy. To the extent you don't say Shiur, you don't sing songs in the Beis Mikdash unless you have wine. On the other hand, water doesn't have a taste. Therefore, a person will not make a bracha on water. You don't appreciate and enjoy water. The only time you will is if you're thirsty, and then it is filling a certain void. But just drinking water itself, if you're not lacking, water doesn't have a taste. Why? A person doesn't have pleasure from drinking water unless he's thirsty. The reason for this difference is really, it can be sourced back to their root in on high, their spiritual levels. Ki yain bina, we explain wine is bina. What is bina? When a person can develop an idea in details, he can think about it, and it really takes on a name and a color. Tam, which is tam v'avana v'asaga, which is taste, which is understanding, which is mayim u'chachma l'ma'al. On the other hand, water is still before I could connect to it rationally. It's before the academic concept is developed. It's still chachma, it's still ma'al matam, it still can't be tasted. Good. So now we just explained in this paragraph what are the karbanis and the nisachim. What are the karbanis? Is the bread, the chitzonis achayis, the wine is the water, is the wine part of the mizbeach, is the penimis achayis of the world, and then you have water, which is even greater than that. But this is all in the realm of things poured on the mizbeach on a regular basis. Nowadays, Dalid, what the Rebbe is going to do is going to ask a simple question. Here it's pretty clear. Water is higher than wine. Water is chachma. There are other places where it's mashma a little bit differently. That water is lower than wine. So let's see. In other Maamar is explained the reason why Torah is compared to wine as well as oil. This goes on the secrets of Torah. Wine, as well as oil, is not something that you can just find. It's not accessible. You need to actually discover it. You need to reveal it. It's hidden within the grape or the olive. The difference is that wine is just one level of razin, medrish, soid, and shemen is typically chassidus, which is razin. The razin is secrets of the secrets. In other words, shemen is a little bit more hidden, but ultimately, wine and oil are both hidden. Then move on. From this is understood. If so, what part of Torah is compared to water? We know Torah is very much compared to water. This goes on Gali, the Torah goes on Nigla. And like to explain the Tanya why indeed is Torah compared to water. Just like water. Its nature is that it always tries to find the lowest surface. It's always going lower and lower. So too, that's the nature of Torah. It lowered itself down from a great high place, which is God's will and God's wisdom. From there, it went down until it was enclosed in physical things. Right, when you learn Torah, you learn halacha, it gives you piskei dinim, it gives you direction how to navigate this physical world. Most halacha is in the physical realm, physical sense. That's the case. If water is nigla, wine is chassidus, is maybe not chassidus, but razi Torah, it's the secrets of Torah. Tzarich lahavin, if so, you have to understand. The beer is olacher lahepim for Maamar zeder, masbar shas Nisim, but ushachag asukis. This beer is l'chayr far kert than the beer we said just now in the Maamar Shal Nisim, as well as the Maamar of the Torah of Sukkot, where we say water is higher, water is chachma. So why here are we saying that the wine is higher? If typically we say, why here are we saying that water is higher than wine? So what's the answer? What the Rebbe is basically going to explain in a brilliant eifin how in truth each of them have an advantage the other one doesn't have. So there's a mile in wine, there's a mile in water. There's a general rule. The higher something is, the lower it can fall. Like the famous Mashal says gives, when a wall falls, the greatest highest bricks are going to go the furthest. And the explanation is, the deeper something's shadish is, it's able to express itself in further places. A wiser person can explain something to the less smart person. Move on. The reason why water on their own have this nature of always looking for the lowest surface, lowest place. Actually, to the extent they're always going to the lowest place. Even after they come down here physically, and they're physical water. This is the spiritual water, of course. Even after they manifest into physical water, their nature is to search and go to the lowest place. Is must be the source of their amshachas from a very high place. Now we can explain based on that. The reason why sometimes we explain water is lower than wine. Look at them. Look at the nature of water. The nature of water is to look for the lowest place. And just simply, water is tasteless, it's low quality, it's low, right? It's very revealed, it doesn't have to be discovered, it's very accessible, it's not something that it's not spiritual, it's not holy, it's very mundane. On the other hand, if you look at wine, the way it is down here in its clear, open form, it's concealed, it needs to be discovered, it's so to speak, it's like spirituality, it's something that needs to be earned and found. It's not accessible. To reveal wine, you need to do a special action. You need to have a special effort. And that's also why, by the way, in the parentheses, in the brackets, the Rebbe says, therefore wine has that nature to bring out the secrets of a person. Wine itself is found through being revealed from its concealment. Because again, it begins as concealed in the grape and it needs to be revealed. Therefore, it has in its nature that it affects the person in the same way. It brings a person's secret, a person's pnimis achais out. So that's one explanation. That's why water is lower. Look at water down here. But ultimately, why in the Maamarim that we're learning, Mayim is higher, Mayim is chachma, because of the source of water. Ultimately, we don't usually typically look at the source of something, right? Typically we look at it way down here. For example, you have Kedusha and Klippa, right? Sometimes we say Klippa is a higher source. Klippa comes from Toyu. No one's going to say Klippa is higher than Kedusha. What's the difference here? Why by water do we say it has that maila, that advantage? Why? Because water. Even down here you can see its source. You can see that it always looks for the lowest surface. In other words, its source is being shown in it. First of all, you could see that it's always going to the lowest place. And another point, also the fact that water is tasteless. Because even the way it comes down, you can see that it's always going to the lowest place. You can see its source. Therefore, it's always higher than taste. It's always higher than accessibility. You always feel when you're drinking it that there's something here which isn't really for me. It's from a higher place, from a different place. So what did Rebbe just tell us? Wine seems greater, it's higher quality, it's more spiritual, it needs to be earned, it needs to be uncovered and revealed. Ultimately, its source might be lower, but down here it's a higher quality drink. Water is a lower quality drink. It's always going to the lowest place, but that itself brings out, has a higher source. So in other words, in a certain sense, Nigla Torah might even have a greater source then Chassidus, just sitting and learning a Taisis, has a certain nekuda of kedusha to it, which can have even a greater source than even learning medrash and the more soid, the more secret part of Torah. Now we're not necessarily talking about Chassidus just yet. Chassidus is Shemin, which we're going to say Shemin has the has the milas over both. So let's see. I say now after we explain the advantage of water and the advantage of wine. Water has a greater source, you can see a source. Wine is higher quality down here. Now we're going to explain how oil, the emes, is greater than both. Let's chat. If you think about it, it's a little bit of a tricky spot here, because on one hand, either you could say oil is higher quality, if so the source of it would be lower, right? If it's more ruchniistic, so it has a lower shirish, or you could say oil is lower than water, its source is higher, but then it has the disadvantage of being down here in a lower way. In other words, ultimately, it's either one. Either you have a higher source, or down here you're a higher eifin. To say that oil now is going to be a maila over both, let's see, that is going to basically tell us how oil on one hand is a higher source than water, but at the same time is greater quality than wine, which is a paradox, which is again the miracle of the oil. Let's see. We explained in the Maamar, the reason why, physically speaking, oil rises above all other liquids is because it's higher than them. According to our entire explanation we just said, the reason why wine is great is because wine down here is tamum ba'nava b'tzelem, it needs to be earned, it's more spiritual, so to speak. But there's still an advantage in water, it's because of its source. And that source is seen and experienced in the water down here. So if that's the case, you have to say, if oil is greater than both, you have to say it's in both concepts. In other words, in the concealment of oil is greater than the concealment of wine. Oil is more hidden in an olive than how hidden wine is in a grape. As well as in its source, the fact that even the way it comes down, it can't be drank, you can't appreciate and experience it, that is going to be even greater than the water, the fact that the water is tasteless. Now that we're going to explain. Let's talk about. First we're going to explain how it's more concealed than wine, and then we're going to move on to explain how it has a greater source than water. Ultimately, wine, it's concealed. You look at a grape, you don't see wine, but it's close to revelation. All you have to do is give it a little squeeze. You press the grape and the wine is already revealed. It's not very difficult. The helm, the concealment of oil, the way oil is hidden in an olive, it's not shaykh legil, it's not accessible. You're going to squeeze an olive, oil will not come out. Therefore, what do you have to do? You have to crush the olive. Which is, first of all, just on a physical level, it's a greater effort. Within Torah, there's different levels of rosin. We already explained wine is one level of rosin, but Mela doesn't take as much of an effort. If you want to reveal the secrets of the secrets, much deeper secrets, you need a much more tremendous, greater gili, which, by the way, like we already said, this Maamar was connected to Yutas Kislev, which the idea of Pnimis HaTorah being revealed through the Alter Rebbe having this idea of ksisha, this idea of being crushed throughout the Helim of the period before Yutas Kislev, so this might be related. Now that Rebbe is going to tell us the Izvav, what taka is the difference between the two levels of Yigiyah? We understand physically you have to crush the olive. What's the difference spiritually between just pressing and crushing? So that's what Rebbe is going to say in Izvav. Typically speaking, even when learning Nigla, there's two ways of toiling. In addition to, generally speaking, every time a person learns Torah, it needs to be with toil, it needs to be with effort. To the extent that it says in the bracket, even when you're reviewing something you already learned, you have to really get involved. You have to put your mind to it. If you're going to spend time just reviewing something, but you're not actually being ma'ayin, that is called bittul Torah. And especially when you're learning deeper things. So when you're learning anything, even reviewing things, but especially deep things, and the first time, you need to invest tremendous koiches, tremendous effort in understanding it. There says there are many, many levels, obviously, in how much toil and how much effort a person needs to invest. But ultimately, the ikea of all the levels are investing in yourself. I'm reading these words again. You never need to get rid of your earlier mitzvahs. On the contrary, you have a mind, you have a heart. Your avoid is now to develop the skills, develop your brain until you're able to understand something so deep and so abstract, where you have to basically work on yourself to understand it. That is one level of Yigiyah. One level of Yigiyah is enhancing your capabilities and understanding things you didn't understand before. Now that Rebbe tells us, you have learning Torah, something which is not in your realm, it's not in your ballgame. So now, anything you're going to do to invest in your own character is not going to bring you any closer to this Indian. You and the thing are in two different worlds. What do you have to do? Ksisha. Now you have to crush your earlier identity. Therefore, Abzera fasted 100 fasts. He wanted to forget Talmud Bavli, because again, Talmud Yerushalmi, before he went to Eretz Yisrael to learn Talmud Yerushalmi, he wanted to completely forget any of his preconceived notions, any of his knowledge, because his knowledge ultimately was in a different world. But Mela, all it would do is get in the way of him developing the skills to learn Talmud Yerushalmi now. So again, however much you're going to develop your character, you're not going to reach this. You need to get rid of your character and begin anew. Here we find practically you have two different levels in Yigiyah. There's Yigiyah like the olive, which you have to press it to bring it out. You have to bring out your true colors. That's like learning Torah typically. You have to bring out your capabilities, and you have to work hard, you have to be ma'ayin. Then there's a whole different type of Yigiyah, a whole different quality, where now we're reaching something new. My previous character will never develop it, will never connect to it. I need to completely get rid of my previous identity, my preconceived notions, and now As a new person, I can try to delve into it, and that is like crushing the olive. You lose its original identity, and now it can become something completely new, something like oil. So here we find how in the helem, in the spirituality, so to speak, the holiness, and the high qualityness of oil, it's greater than wine, it's more concealed than wine, it takes more effort to reveal it. Now the person tells another advantage over wine. This is a segue getting into water as well. When it comes to drinking oil, you're not able to connect the oil in that way. If you don't make a bracha when you drink oil, ultimately, it's not royal l'shtia. You cannot drink oil. That's not the way you appreciate oil. You don't enjoy oil through drinking it. This is the polar opposite of wine. How come? Wine, after you crush wine, not just did you enhance it, but now it's so chashuv you make a new bracha on it. Which is very interesting, because there's only two fruits and vegetables that Allah says when you crush it and when you make it into juice, it's going to maintain its original bracha. And on the contrary, it's even going to become greater. So wine becomes ber piagafen. It's very chashuv. Oil technically would have remained ha'etz. The only problem is you can't drink it. It's mazik for the person. Kumtes, we see here, in a certain sense, the oil, however high quality it is, it's not accessible. It's not really l'shtia, and that makes it greater than wine in the sense that you can't connect to it. Now that Rebbe is going to tell us, if that's even greater than water. This is even greater than the helem, the hiddenness that we explained regarding water, which that brought out the source of water. Right? You're right, water has no taste. Nevertheless, you're able to drink how much water you want. In other words, there's the ability to drink it. It might not have a good taste, you might not appreciate it, but you could drink it. You could, in a certain scenario, appreciate water if you're thirsty, if you're lacking. So there is a way of connecting to water. So in other words, it has a very high source. You feel that it's tasteless, but there's still a way of connecting to it. Drinking shemesh later actually have it is helen, which is completely higher than gilui. You see here an amazing thing. Oil is greater than wine in its concealment. In other words, down here in this world, it's more spiritual than wine, as well as in its source. You could see that it's something higher than even water. It has a higher source than water, therefore you can't even drink it. You can't connect in that way. And this difference between wine, water, and oil. These three levels here. Where wine has a taste, water doesn't have a taste, but it can be drank. Oil doesn't have the capability to be drank. You can't even connect it on that way. It's all connected, it's all parallel to their reality, the way they are in a spiritual sense. We explained water is bina, the part of your mind which develops. Therefore, this taste, it's geschmack. You can delve into a rationale, into intellectual subject. Water is that original energy, which is higher than understanding. Therefore, there's no reasoning. There's no taste. Ultimately, you can have pleasure because it's all part of the revealed mind. Shemen, ultimately oil is higher than both. It's keser, chachma, the way it's still in keser, chachma stima, b'meila, yes, is the source of chachma. It can't be experienced in any chachma gluya, in any seichel, so to speak, in any way. There's no way of tasting it, there's no way of drinking it. Now that we explained the greatness of oil, the paradox of oil, how its source is higher than water, the way it comes down is more spiritual than wine. Now we can understand, by the way, which is a paradox, like we explained. Typically we would say the higher the source is, the lower it goes. Here we have a very high source, but it stays very spiritual, more spiritual than wine. This is a miracle of oil. Now let's go into the different levels of oil. So let's see. Now we can understand why. When I want to establish a mizbeach, I want to make a foundation. Chinuch. For the mizbeach, I use shemen hamishcha, I use oil. Through bringing within it, drawing into it chachmas tima, which is chachma de keser, chachma which is higher than chachma, right? Now I could, in other words, when you bring in chachmas tima, now you have the space from within. Chachma and Bina can thrive. Karbanis and Nesachim can thrive. And then the Alter Rebbe continues. Within the oil, there is smell. Reach smells even greater than oil. So in other words, oil is what? Razin de razin. If something even greater. And that's the smell of the oil. What's pshat? The fragrance. Ultimately, oil is completely above the taste and the pleasure of a person to the extent I can't drink it. Nevertheless, who nitfas b'mishush, I can touch oil. I can touch oil like a shmir oil. The way oil connects to a person is not through drinking, but it's through experiencing. You feel oil. So there is some sort of sense that could relate to the oil, physical sense. Once we go into the realm of fragrance, smell, can't touch a smell. It's a pleasure that only the neshama has. The guf doesn't experience smell. Now we can tie that back into our conversation. We have wine, water, oil, and now we have the smell of oil. Vas. We already explained the oil of Torah is the secret of the secret. Ultimately, the great secrets, once they're discovered, they could come into seichel. That's like touching. They can be touched, they can be felt. To the extent they come down into words, into letters. What's the reach of Torah? What's the fragrance of Torah that's completely higher even than razin? There are things that cannot be understood. There are things in Torah that you cannot understand, and it's not that they're very deep and they're rozin de rozin, and they need to be. And in order to understand them, you have to lose your identity, like Reb Zera. No, these are things that you will never understand, even after you do ksisha. If so, then what's the purpose? What's the point of reach if I can never understand it? The answer is because there is a way of drawing it down. Just like we say regarding smell, that the guf doesn't have any experience, doesn't have a feeling towards it. But when you smell something very strong, the neshama comes down to the guf. There's a way of drawing down. Reach helps me bring my neshama into my guf. That's the Torah. So what then is the reach of Torah? There's a part of Torah which you don't understand, but it can be brought down. Psak din is the bittul of Torah. The Torah were like, azoy. This is the halacha, this is what you do. In this realm of psak din, you bring down reich. Va'ad, to the extent we say Mashiach yemeroich v'doyin. Mashiach will smell and he'll paskin. In other words, psak din has this concept of bringing down the part of Torah which is only nitvas in smell. How will I bring the reich of Torah down? Through a psak din. Meroich v'doyin, he's going to smell and then he's going to judge. Ultimately, that taste is completely higher than seichel. Right? We know the rule of a psak din. It's an amazing thing. Even if you don't agree to the psak din, ultimately, that's the psak din. Even if you don't understand the psak din. You can have 51 people saying one way, 49 people saying the other way. Now the 49 have to go figure it out. Right? Even though it doesn't make sense. They never came up with that conclusion. There's a Gemara that says Rav had a certain argument that he was stumped. He didn't have what to answer. Nevertheless, he didn't change his mind. Why? It was in a way of re'iyah. He couldn't articulate it in words. He couldn't bring it down into an explanation. Therefore, he couldn't explain his position. But ultimately, he saw it with the re'iyah. B'meila, he was able to paskin according to that. He couldn't explain it. It was higher than explanation, but it was able to be brought down through a psak din. That is the re'iyah of shemen. So now we have one level up. Shemen can be touched, so tzrazin derazin can come into seichel. Now there's re'iyah, which is a psak din, which is a greater level. Now that we explain that there's shreach, nichoyach, there's shemen hamishcha, there's the fragrance in oil. Now let's move on to explain shemen lamoyer. This is a test, the final ice. The third to last ice, but the ice is going to explain to us what indeed is the miracle of the pach Hashem. Dine. Now that he explains the great advantage, the mile of Shem HaMishcha of the anointing oil, now we'll explain why the luminary oil was even greater than the anointing oil. The light, the fire that comes from the consumption of the oil is greater than the oil itself. Well, so far we have a certain comparison here where the smell is higher than the actual oil, and the fire, the light, is higher than the oil. And the Rebbe says in the brackets, in short, the oil is higher than the shemen. So the light that comes from oil is greater than the smell that comes from oil. But ultimately, what's the difference? Why is the luminary oil so much greater? And ultimately, what's the purpose of the fragrance of oil? It's to give me a certain connection to the oil. So who's serving who? The fragrance is serving the oil. The psak din can bring down the reach, right? The oil is being accessed through the shemen, through the reach. So the reach is serving the shemen. The reach, the smell, is serving the oil. So the oil is greater. Only through reach can chachmas come into gilui, like we said, the psak din shiur mizbeach, and now through that you're able to inaugurate the mizbeach she'aroy lekabanis l'ntzach. That's all in the context of shemen hamishcha. When it comes to oil and light, Hashemen ubishvil ha'or. Now it's on the contrary. The oil is here to serve the light. To the extent the oil is consumed, it becomes light. So the oil is bottled to the light. You have light, it's even greater than oil. In addition to how great and how high it is, this light that's made, that's created from the consumption of the oil, this itself is helim. In other words, essentially it's inaccessible. It's something that you can't experience, right? Like we said, water is gilly, you could drink it. Wine, you could drink it. Oil, you could touch it. Smell, you could smell it. Light, what way are you experiencing light, right? So it's helim. Like he explains, fire, we explain, at length Chassidus is always going up to its source, so it's always disappearing, right? It's going away. Shemen, even shemen is helim in comparison to this it's so hidden. Even though the shemen is helim, and the oil is definitely helim, it's all hidden, it's all secret. Especially the oil that's made from the consumption of the oil is helim. What happens to this oil? This light becomes a luminary. It lights. So imagine you have the greatest, highest source, the most concealed thing, the thing that technically doesn't exist in our world, and nevertheless it's illuminating. That's a miracle. Nevertheless, it's experienced. But it's benachas. It's here and it's comfortable here. It's not running anywhere. So they take the highest, greatest thing that has nothing to do with our world and make it light, benachas, and it makes it light in a yashvus agaven, that's a miracle. And then they see that they're going to take the miracle to the next level. From this is understood the great ilui that now you have a nest, you have a miracle of Chanukah with Bach Shem. Why? This is all the menorah every day of the year. Imagine there's a miracle now, where this miracle is only supposed to last one day, right? The candle is supposed to last one day, but it lasts 8 days. Because this is through a miracle, the miracle makes it even greater oil, even greater light. The light is a miraculous light. So not just any oil was bisyashvus, but a miraculous oil, which is even greater, still sat in this world calmly. That could also connect it to the fact that it lasts for 8 days. Why? What's 8? Why is 8 show on integration, systematic, a system, right? In other words, that the greatest, highest things come down in the normal system. When you have the greatest, highest in the Zayin Yom Atik, the midos, the way they're still in Keser, when they come down to Malchus, into the 8th, Shershin Evroim, which is the source of creation, and that makes it revealed down all the way down this world. Which maybe there's another small nekuda here where be'etzim, this type of light should only last for 1 day. L'poil lasts for 8 days, meaning it's a tremendous, tremendous miracle which shouldn't be here b'hisyashvus. 8 days already hisyashvus. 8 days means this is becoming, so to speak, the way of the world, which is a tremendous miracle, taking the highest nekuda, the oil that comes from Kalein Hashem and the greatest Helam, and making it begili in Bisyashvus, Yud Aleph, Yiratzin. Very soon we should be zeicher to the ultimate redemption, the coming of Mashiach. One of the prophecies of Geula is the Kriyas Yamsov in the 7 rivers. At the same time, there's the 8th Nisim. I'm not sure exactly what the reference here is, maybe connected to the 7 Yom in Atik into Malchus. But the bottom line is you have the greatest, highest revelations to the extent of the kinner of the world to come, which will have 10 strands. And the Rebbe says, it's all going to be the Beis HaMikdash, which is going to be eternal, which maybe is connecting the concept of the greatest, highest things, but in the way of Isyashrus, the Maamar shall be very speedily, like the Rebbe says, Jewish people do tshuva, and they will right away be revealed, they will right away be redemption. So what is the Nekuda? What do we basically say here? There is oil, there is wine, and there's water. Everyone has an advantage. Water has the greatest, highest source, but down here it's low quality. Can't drink it, right? It shows on its high source. You have wine, which is higher quality, but its source is lower. Mela that represents Nigel Torah, and then you have Soid, you have Remez, you have higher things. Then there's Shemen, which is Razin de Razin. Shemen is higher than both. Its source is higher than water, therefore it's not accessible even through drinking. You can only touch it. And its quality is even more concealed than wine. So it's more holy than wine, and has a higher source, and you can see its source higher than water. And then we said within oil, there's the Shemen HaMishcha, which is the psamin, the fragrance, which is even higher than oil. Within that you have even higher, you have the illumination, right? The oil of the fire. And even higher than that you have when that's done through a nest. And when this greatest, highest helim, the greatest, highest concealments can be revealed in a way of Isyashvus, that is a tremendous, tremendous miracle. And again, tying it into the narrative of our Maamar, where the Alter Rebbe is telling Chassidim to take the greatest, highest the greatest energy, the greatest motivation, but channel it into avodah in a pnimius, in an eternal, and in a systematic oifen. Fine, tzlach Rabba, have a good day.